Well, good afternoon, everybody. Amazing to see you all back here. I will apologise in advance. We only have 40 minutes, I think. And so I'm going to do my best to do justice to all of the things that I would love to share with you and give us the opportunity to explore together. What I'm going to try and do is, in the spirit of a masterclass, build on from this morning's session. Okay, so I'm not going to go back over and repeat. I'm going to build on and go deeper and deeper for you. And I'm hoping that if you're anything like me, some of the things I love most about these types of opportunities is getting to interact together. So I'm going to get all of you at work to actually start working out, how do we stop talking about this thing called the future of work, and how do we get our call to action mobilized? So before we leave today, we are going to use this flip chart, and we are all going to put up our personal commitment. And we'll take a pretty photo of us all with the personal commitments, so as you can really feel that you're going away with a call to action. Because every day the thing that I have to focus on is taking a superficial conversation about the future of work and making it real. So first thing, just real quick, you don't need to know more about me. I'm sure you've got a feel for me and how passionate I am about what I do. I'm very fortunate to do what I do. Okay, so this is in our morning section. Let's get through that. You're all experts on all of that now. And now what I just want you to think about, hopefully you got some sticky notes. If you haven't, please yell out, share. I want you to just really, really quickly think about, what was your biggest takeaway this morning? And it doesn't have to have been from the session that I did. Just what is the biggest takeaway as you went and had your lunch? You had a moment, I hope, to reflect. What's the biggest takeaway right now that's resonating with you? And just quickly jot it down on your sticky notes. Because we haven't got great room here to put all our sticky notes up, what I might do is just come around the different tables and invite some of you to just share. And again, this is just to get us warmed up, just to get you going. And you'll get a feel for the fact that I really don't like it when everyone's quiet. So please help me. So anyone want to start? What's your biggest takeaway this morning? Change? Change is the only constant. We need to expect and assume perpetual disruption. Love it. Faith. You got it. The face of HR is the human factor the technology is supporting. Think about how that has flipped. I challenge CFOs every day, and I say to them, how are you measuring the ROI of your technology investments? And they give me all of the numbers about the hardware costs and the software costs, and I say, what about the ROI in terms of your workforce performance, your workforce engagement? That's what we should be measuring the ROI of our technology on. Okay, anyone else? Growth mindset. Yes, we have to think big. We have to be curious. Sometimes I do a little bit too much of that. Anyone else over down here wants to share? Define your values. Be clear on the mission. I feel often for HR, the piece we miss at the very beginning is, how does this link to the business strategy? We often get so immersed in our HR vision, our people strategy, and forget to really go back, sit in that CXO room and talk about, what is our business strategy? What is the business need to be doing tomorrow? What does that mean to the work we need to be doing tomorrow? What does that then mean to the jobs, the skills, all of those good things? Great one. Okay, I'm going to keep this moving because I promise I'm going to get you all speaking. But anyway, so this morning I introduced the 3 fundamentals. Think like a researcher, co-create the relationship, and prioritize human outcomes. What you probably didn't know is within each of these 3 fundamentals are 3 key trends that we believe every organisation needs to really focus on to embrace each of these new fundamentals. So there's going to be 9 trends in total. Each of the 9 trends has different opportunities and challenges for us all to navigate. But there was one factor that when we were writing our research, we said, okay, there's 9 clear trends, but leadership is a factor that's going across all of them. So think of leadership as number 10. So what I'm going to do is give you a quick overview of the 10. So take you further down. And what I want you to do before we do that, though, is as you think about how do we think like a researcher? How do we co-create the relationship? How do we prioritize human outcomes? What are some of the hopes and fears that are on your mind? Because I think we all know this isn't necessarily easy. You know, it's great to come to these type of sessions and to get all inspired, and then you go back to the work environment or you sit at home late at night and you think, yeah, but how do I make that real for me? How do I make that real? How am I going to go and talk to the CEO tomorrow or to my team tomorrow? So what are some of your hopes and fears? Pop them on your sticky notes if you've got them. Share them with each other. Hopes and fears. My biggest fear that I've been talking about for the last 3 years is that we are going to miss this moment. That we have seen some of the most phenomenal innovation and progress on the human agenda over the last 2-3 years, and yet we are starting to see old legacy ways creep back. You heard me say this morning, 75% of business leaders believe their people need to be back in the on-site environment. And when I really talk to them, and I ask them, why do you think that is? It isn't necessarily because they think the moments that matter in the work to be done needs to happen. It's because they say, we just can't make hybrid work. It's just not working. So, hopes and fears. Share them with each other. Yes, yes. How do I know the right tech? And by the time you've chosen it, the next tech's around. I mean, look at ChatGPT. Wow. 8 weeks. Yes, miss the chance. Yes, yes, and we'll miss the chance. I think there's never been a better moment for HR to own the people agenda in the C-suite conversation. HR doesn't necessarily need to lead the technology dimension or the financial dimension, but HR is best positioned to be the orchestrator and to convene the conversation. To ask the CEO, what do you want for our business today, tomorrow, and beyond? To ask the CFO, what's our financial model? And to then actually say, well, if this is where the business is going, these are the things that we need to think about in terms of our people. What else? What other hopes and fears down here? More disengagement. More disengagement between teams. And I especially see that in Japan where seniority is embedded in the social fabric of society, you know, and so it isn't as comfortable, particularly for junior members, to just ping somebody or quickly call their superior like this is a big moment. And so, yeah, I think this isolation, sorry, falling down the hole, is a really big thing. Yeah. Great comments. So here what we're hearing is the change is so rapid, but also we're not making very deliberate decisions about where and why we are doing our work. One of the things that I'm going to talk about when I show you one of the trends is the trend around the future of the workplace. Now, I remember the very first project I did at the beginning of COVID for a large global pharma company. And they said, Nick, we want to get ahead of the game. Help us design our future of work strategy. Help us work out how we should and could work. How should we use the on-site, hybrid, virtual environment? And they started talking all about the workplace. And they were really, they were taken aback when I said, I don't want to hear about the workplace. I'll talk to you about that in 6 weeks' time. I need to understand the work that needs to be done, the moments that matter in the work to be done. Because to your point, I may be a bus driver, I may need to spend a lot of my time on the bus, but I guarantee there's going to be some moments where maybe I don't, right? But we assume I'm the bus driver, so I don't have access to the non-on-site things. And so we really had to first focus on asking people, what is the work you are doing? What is the work you are doing where you could and should be in the on-site environment? Where are you feeling that you can do your work best and why? And we actually found in our human capital trends research, only 15% of respondents said they believe that the way work is designed is an important factor in creating the future workplace. Now, my hypothesis is that's probably why 20% of respondents said we are not ready to create the right workplace model. We just still don't get it. And that's why we're calling everyone back. What are the hopes and fears? Forgetting the lessons that we learned. Like I said this morning, this is a completely new and different world, so everything has been learning. How do we work out and harness all of that learning so as we hold on to the things that worked and we use the things that didn't to actually understand how do we pivot, how do we keep going? Any other hopes and fears? Yeah.
Particularly to the new entrants that are waking up to the reality of remote working, and also organizations to maybe have or question themselves whether they have systems that are matured enough to measure performance objectively under remote working.
Great question. So the first question was about, how do we create that culture, that sense of belonging, that sense of connection? And when I think about the big moments that matter, that most organizations talk about, for example, there's onboarding, there is performance discussions, there are strategic decision making, there are some key moments that really matter, where sometimes they just have to be in person, or we have to really think about at least how we're going to use video on if we're in a really desperate situation. So I think it's how do you be really intentional, right? And say, There may be these 3 or 4 key moments. So for onboarding, maybe it is that there is the first 4 days, or maybe it is that there are 3 moments every week for the first 4 weeks, right? And those moments may be a combination of on-site, but I think the thing is being very deliberate. I was quite surprised with some of the work I've done, where what I found a lot of the workforce said is they didn't feel that the deep work that they needed to do quietly and remotely was really being valued and thought about. They thought management was only thinking about when do we need to collaborate in person, and they didn't feel that management was really also at the same time thinking about there are moments when I'm doing code, when I'm doing report writing, when I'm doing emails, when I actually am going to be more productive, I'm going to feel more connected if I can do it. So I think it's how do we be intentional? So over the last 3 years, just like we saw this morning, flexibility has been the big word on the center of the stage. And I've had personally a big issue with that for the last 3 years. Because you think about delivering work through the construct of a team. One person wants to work at 4 a.m. like me, I'm a morning person. One person wants to be working at 4 a.m., another person wants to be working at 10 p.m., another one wants to be working at midday. But there are some moments during the day where we need to connect. Somebody's extroverted, somebody's introverted. How do we actually, if we say we just got to give everybody the chance to be flexible, how do we then orchestrate this so as it's not chaotic disruption? And so I think it's all about intentionality, and it's hard work though, right? It's hard work to go through what is the work we're doing and deconstruct it to actually say, here are these moments. And rather than just assuming, oh, this is a software developer, or, oh, this is a marketing person, or, oh, this is a salesperson. We make generalizations, but every single worker, I guarantee, has moments in their day where they're going to be more effective, productive, and feel more belonging if they can actually have that flex.
Nicole, one of the fears that we get quite often from our leaders, particularly, is that loss of control, and it's really difficult. I don't know if it's a common theme across for this room as well. It becomes a real challenge for us to value sell and tell them that, hey, you have to value the work and not the hours, the output, not the visibility. So how do we, do that positioning better? Because it's the leadership where we see a lot of fear, a lot of resistance coming in, at least with respect to adapting flexibility.
And there's one element of that. So here we're talking about leaders not wanting to lose control. If we can't see the workers and we can't see them working, we are anxious that they're slacking off at home, they're not productive, or we may be worried about their mental health and their well-being because we may worry that they're isolated. There's an element of this that is mindset, right? And so, but I actually think this is where data is our best friend, especially if you know that control is something that is really featuring, right? Because if you can use data to actually show the outputs, right? So you can actually show, for example, if it's a salesperson, you can show their sales numbers. If it is innovation, you can show the number of innovation, features that have advanced. So I think this is where, and especially engagement, like for a lot of CEOs, they've been blown away when they actually look at what the workers are telling them they need. And especially given the talent and skill shortages that we had been facing over the last 18 months, CEOs have actually, many, have had a moment where they've said to me, wow, I don't like it, but I realise I've actually got to listen to this because it's real. So I think data can help you. And this is where I think as HR professionals, how can you create the data and the narrative and the story to actually keep ahead? So you're not defending, You're shaping, right? You're actually there leading the way, saying, we're thinking that we might pilot this with this group. We think it might work, and this is how we're going to do it. And we're going to do a pilot, and then we're going to look at these different levers, and we're going to come back to you. Rather than leadership saying, no. Kind of how do you lead, but lead in a way that you let the leadership know, I understand we've got to measure outcomes, and we will do that, but we're going to need to find a different way to do it. Is that? I'll come back.
As leaders, we do go through stages, we do go through very particular cycles, and actually we're presenting all through technology. Personally, I live in an age where I didn't grow up with that technology. There's a huge amount of speed that's in knowledge. Really, what's the value of change and stuff is really accelerating.
It is, and you think about how we're feeling with the fatigue, right? With the change and the speed. Imagine the younger workers who don't have that lived experience, right? Of how do I adapt? How do I pick myself up? And the fatigue is very, very real. I mean, we're seeing it. Just look at some of the big celebrities, right? Especially with females, right? I mean, you look at Serena Williams has been very open in why she made some decisions. And, Ash Barry, and now we've got the New Zealand president. I mean, I think the fatigue is very real. And this is where I think when we're talking about the boundaryless world, it's not only about the old boundaries that are changing, it's also about we need to define new boundaries, right? Because that always on, right now, there are often no boundaries. So how do we lead the way and actually say no? I mean, I know even for me, I love it when Microsoft Outlook reminds me, because I'm in a global role, I'm always communicating 24/7. I love it when Microsoft Outlook reminds me, this person, it's currently not their working hours. Do you want to wait for the email to get sent? I love it, so I think we've got to create the new boundaries and especially reward for that, right? So how do we reward when our people do say, I actually can't do that today, or when they don't pick up a phone, and you encourage that behaviour, So I think it's. Oh, sorry, you didn't.
One of my biggest fears for the future of work is how to embrace the change. We talk about the human at the center of it, whether in a decade's time or in 2 decades. When the whole face is changing, how do we ensure that the current human factor, what we have, we are ready to embrace that change and be ready what is coming in, or be there actually when that change is happening.
Yeah, and I actually did a webinar, a cloud webinar yesterday for France, Germany, and Netherlands, and it had been a little while since I talked about this, but maybe this will help set the stage. I always say we need to think about every worker and every candidate that we might be considering as if they are an Olympic champion in a sport. And we need to decide, are we going to select them to be on our Olympic team for the next Olympics, and we don't know what sport they're going to be competing in? We know it's not going to be the sport they're the champion in, right? So we need to, when we're thinking about embracing this change, right, I think we need to be thinking about how do we train that future-ready workforce? How do we create that mindset so as we are building, the resilience, the collaboration, the risk-taking, the ability to do decision-making based on scenario planning. These are the things. You think about an Olympic champion, it's their discipline in training, it's their ethics, it's their ability to team if it's a team sport, right? And so when I'm thinking about how do I embrace and navigate this, I always think about that. I always think about, Nick, just think about the Olympic team, because you're trying to design for what you don't know. But you do know that Today it might be ChatGPT. 4 months' time it's going to be something else. You do know that it's just going to keep changing. But the fundamental ability to change and evolve is not going to happen. I'm going to push us along just a little bit because I just want to make sure that you get an overview of the trends. So remember, think like a researcher. The first one we talked about already this morning, the shift from skills to jobs. And I sincerely believe that AI-powered talent marketplaces are the biggest game changer in revolutionizing our ability to not only shift to a skill-based approach, but even if we're not, revolutionizing our ability to access, engage, and develop our talent. Skill-based org research that we did in the middle of the year, there's one data point that I lose sleep over every day when I decide to sleep. Only 18% of workers and only 26% of business leaders believe that their organization is currently using the skills and capabilities of their workers to the fullest potential. Now you hear that, and then you hear 70% of leaders saying, I can't find talent and skills. My hypothesis is they're right under your nose. You don't know about it. You know, in Hong Kong, 2021, there was a 20+% increase in the sale of life insurance policies. The hypothesis is that a big role and reason was because 3 big global insurers decided to focus on recruiting the airline, hostesses, and cabin crew that had lost their job. All of that airline staff came and interjected superpowers around customer service and customer centricity. You know, so I think my hypothesis is there are hidden talent, hidden skills in our organisation today. And I've always said, I remember 8 years ago, somebody at a panel event one night saying, I'm sick of these Gen Zs and millennials. I'm sick of their attitude. I can't motivate them. And I said to the person with the greatest of respect, if I was feeling like you, I'd be really asking myself, as a leader, do I understand what energizes these individuals? And if I do, why aren't I trying to align them with work that will energize them? Because I don't know about you, but whenever I'm doing things that energize me, I'm unstoppable. I want to learn. I want to go the extra mile, you know. And so I asked this person to think about their leadership. Yeah. So, a couple of things. This is where, first of all, I think AI can be very powerful because AI sometimes can even let the individuals know things that they've not even realized, right? That they've got some skills or potential or passions that might be transferable. So AI-powered talent marketplaces are amazing. I remember about 8 years ago, I was listening to a podcast one morning. I think it might have been the CEO of Ritz-Carlton, maybe it was one of the big hotel chains. And he said he was blown away. They had done an AI experiment and they found that for their doormen, the number one indicator of a high-performing doorman was that they liked gardening. And, I mean, this was many, many years ago. I heard this podcast and I'm like, that's what it's about, people. Right? And I bet the gardeners didn't even realise that, right? I bet the door people would never have thought, I'm a gardener, I'm going to be a good bellman, you know, or bellwoman. So I think AI is very helpful. But the other thing is, we've got to ask our people, not just about what's your education, what jobs have you done. We need to understand their passions. And I always say to any individual, I do a lot of mentoring, coaching at all levels, and I always say, no matter what, there is always something we can do today to help someone connect with something they're passionate about. We may not be able to give them a job or a project assignment today, but we can connect them with a learning opportunity. We can connect them with a networking opportunity. We can help them continue to grow and follow. So I think we've got to ask, right, what are those passions? I think AI is very helpful the way that it can scrape and it can find out more. And I think that's why we're really seeing talent marketplaces as the big game changer there. And it's a different piece, right? When you're dealing with it as a talent marketplace, the worker owns their profile. This isn't in your HRIS, right? HRIS is their employee record. That's for HR and all of the transactional stuff. The profile in the talent marketplace is for the individual to say, this is who I am, and to enable the organization to learn about the individual, again, without the boundaries, right? Without the boundaries of the employee record, where the employee record only wants the job codes and the years and the tenure. Okay. The other example here is quite an extreme one, Morningstar. They've only got 2 levels of management, the founding president, everything else, the individual workers. They define their own work outcomes. So that's a very extreme. But I think skills-based approach, if you're interested in it, reach out to me, because there's some really great podcasts that I'd love to share with you and more research. So reach out. The second one is around powering that human impact with technology. Now, that one I talked about this morning. And for me, what excites me is the way that, as I said, this isn't just helping us do our work better. And it's not just helping us create better jobs, better green jobs, smart jobs. It's about making us better humans. That's what excites me. Because I think sometimes, even with the technology conversation, we get stuck thinking about the technology and how is it doing the work. But we need to get beyond that now. So I think that's exciting. And then the third trend here is what I talked about earlier, activating that future workplace by looking at the workplace as an input to the work. So your focus is on, I've got this work that needs to be done. How are we going to best do this work? And one of the factors that you're going to think about is workplace, but that's only one input. And so it's a very, very different way of thinking about workplace. And particularly for senior executives right now, they say to me, so should it be 1 day, 2 days, 3 days on site? I'm like, I'm not having that conversation with you. You're having the wrong conversation. That's why hybrid's not working. Let's talk about the moments that matter, the work you need to be done. Let's look at your worker sentiment. Let's look at what your customers need. You need to elevate the outcomes and experiences for all. Co-creating the relationship, the 3 big trends here. So the first one is around negotiating worker data. There's a Harvard Business Review piece that's quite recent. 90% of workers now say that they are happy for their employer to collect worker data about them, but only if it is valuable and has benefit to them. And so I think this is something that is going to become more and more and more important. As we all know, the data that HR holds is sacred, and it gives HR power, right? Only HR has that data. 15 years ago, I listened to somebody from Barclays in the US, and his big message to HR was, don't let go of the data. Don't let it go to into the data lake. Like, that is our power. So I think, and I gave you the example of Schlumberger, where, yes, they are using the data to work out how can we improve productivity, reduce fatigue, but at the same time, the workers. The second one's around that harnessing worker agency, which I think all of us have seen. It's probably been the biggest shift. In 2021, we wrote a special report around the evolution of the worker-employer relationship. And we explored 4 different scenarios in how we thought the relationship might evolve. And it's been really interesting to just see how quickly that has moved in the way that the workers really have put their feet on the ground over the last 12 months and said, we're making new choices. We are reevaluating what's important to us. And then workforce ecosystems. Now, this one was interesting. Some of you may know Deloitte has been partnering with MIT Sloan for 4 years on workforce ecosystems. So, I mean, I think it's fair to say we created the voice in the market around workforce ecosystems. So as authors, we sat there late at night in New York and we said, you know what? I don't think we should do a chapter on this. Like, we've been writing about this for 4 years. Our stuff is so good. It's progressive. It's solid. It's groundbreaking. I don't think we've got anything new to say. And we thought about it, and we thought about it. And then we said, well, hang on. When we look at how organizations are unlocking ROI around workforce ecosystems, we're actually not seeing the ROI. So even though we all realize, and there's been greater acceptance, that our external contributors are becoming more and more and more important and valuable, just as our on-balance sheet workers, for a variety of reasons, by the way. In some cases, it's a strategic move. In other cases, over the last 12 months, it's been survival, no supply, so just I need contractors. And so we said, we think there's a story here that we are not unlocking the full potential. Interestingly, when we got our survey data back, workforce ecosystems was the trend that had the biggest readiness gap. It was the biggest readiness gap, where the gap between our respondents telling us that they knew this was important and their readiness to actually unlock the opportunity, the biggest readiness gap. So we gave ourselves a bit of a pat on the back and said, yeah, that was a bit of a risk we took and it paid off. Culture was the number one. Technology, another one. And I think also too, sometimes structure and governance, right? Because when you're thinking about workforce ecosystems, quite often HR doesn't even have much of a role in the governance. I mean, you've got procurement or you've got finance, and so because you haven't got a holistic workforce management system, I mean, just an hour ago, I had one of my colleagues in Brussels say, Nick, I need your help. I've got a client who wants you to talk about total workforce management, and so, yeah, I think that's definitely, holding back. So legislation is definitely playing a role in terms of work from anywhere and needing to be mindful there. Like, I think for many of the organisations that I work with, one of their greatest frustrations is they got leadership support and sponsorship to start looking more at a global talent pool if they're multinational, but then they actually haven't been able to execute, because of that. So I would say, the legislations are, but in most cases, it's the culture first of all, right? And I mean, in our special trends report, and I don't know if anyone's here from Unilever, I've worked with Unilever for many years, and I just think they are the greatest shining example, especially of working like a researcher at the moment, the pilots that they've had in all different aspects. But in the report, we give the example of Unilever, and it may be, let's say, 150,000 on balance sheet employers. Maybe it's a lot more. Let's say 150,000 on balance sheet workers, but it's something like 3 million external contributors that they're relying on. And it's like, wow, we probably don't even realise the size of our external workforce and the opportunity to actually unleash. So, yeah. Workforce ecosystems, of course, also connects into a skill-based approach, right? Because if you want to take a skill-based approach, then you need to be thinking about those build, buy, borrow, bot decisions, and that's where your workforce ecosystem comes into play. if I then take you into prioritizing human outcomes, this was an area that we had never written about before. We had written a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but we had not written before about sustainability and human risk. So this was pretty exciting for us. And even myself, it was just an incredible growth journey. So diversity, equity, and inclusion, as I talked about this morning, you know, I think we often feel that any activity that we're doing is good and positive. And we often don't take a moment to think, well, maybe some of those activities are actually counterproductive. You know, maybe rather than doing that extra training course in unconscious bias, we need to really be dealing with something else first. And so, you know, this shift away from just, have we got unconscious bias training? Are we looking at female participation? What are our numbers? To actually saying, what are the underlying unknown unmet needs, right? And so I think this was a big shift. Then the human sustainability, I think we all know how big ESG and sustainability is right now for every organisation. I had my aha moment. I run a CXO roundtable for Future of Work in Japan every month. It happened organically. I offered a small group of my clients the opportunity to give them an early preview of the 2021 Human Capital Trends Special Report. They loved it, so they said, Nick, can we do this every month? And I'm like, fine. Just before Christmas, one of those individuals said, okay, everyone, can I dry run? I'm about to step into a board meeting, and I've got to try, and she was trying to pitch what we call in Japan side jobs. So it's like gig work, allowing their people to be able to do some gig work. Can I, dry run with you? Okay. And as we got talking about it, she said, this board meeting is all about ESG. I'm like, oh, wow. What are you doing around the human agenda, the human implications? Everyone was silent. And I'm like, serious? Like, all of you? Are any of you talking with your executive teams and boards about the human implications of their decarbonisation strategy? And they said, one of them straight away said, I'm actually embarrassed and ashamed that I've never thought about it. I actually didn't realise that we've got to step up here. And so I think, this really thinking about, okay, how do we bring the human implications into the big ESG conversation is key. And then also elevating the focus on human risk. Late last night, I had one of my colleagues in China going, I don't know if I really get this. And I'm like, goodness sake, how many clients are we working with on their location strategy because they want to get headquarters out of Hong Kong because of socio-political reasons? That's human risk. You think about what Google have been doing with driving private and public sector collaboration to try to really create future-ready workforces at a national level, at a community level. That's human risk, right? You look at what Unilever did with their U-Work platform. Now, their U-Work platform first began because they said, we've got a lot of workers nearing retirement. We want to find a way to engage them differently. These people are valuable, they're keen. And so they said, well, what about if we created a whole new employment model? And we create this little like a gig platform. We give them a monthly retainer, no matter what, but then they can do as many assignments as they like. They get paid for each assignment, so monthly retainer guaranteed, make more money or less money based on taking on extra assignments, but then they get the healthcare benefits, they get the learning system access, and they get a pension, right? And so think about that. That's an example of human risk, right? They recognise in order to keep the talent they need to move forward, they actually needed to look at how can we hold on to these very valuable workers longer. So I think, they're really key. What I will highlight is I talked about leadership this morning, and I'm happy to share all these slides with you as well. Feel free to reach out. What I wanted to highlight to you is this is what we heard very scary about leadership. So first of all, not surprising, 94% of our respondents said leadership's important. It's, the most important thing of anything for us to navigate this boundaryless world. And not surprising, only 23% of respondents said we've got the leaders we need. What devastated me? You heard this morning us talking about well-being, mental health, flexibility. Only 15% of respondents believe they've got the leaders with the capability to lead inclusively in this boundaryless world. Now think about that when we're talking about the fatigue, when we're talking about creating the new boundaries. This is disturbing. Early in the pandemic, every executive team I met, I said, tell me what you're doing around inclusive leadership right now. I did not have one single team answer me. They said, we've got to focus on this remote, this hybrid. I said, exactly, that's why I'm asking, what are you doing about inclusive leadership? How are you dealing with the fact that you've got all of these people working in different types of environments, and how are your leaders coping with that? So that was scary. The other one that was scary was only 16% believe their leaders are ready to harness the power of technology. Now today we've been hearing all about the technology, right? Our leaders aren't even ready to embrace it. And then talking about the workplace, only 18% on that. Now you may find this helpful. I went into the data because I'm an author of the report. I get the privilege of having access to the raw data. So I pulled out some Middle East data for you to show you some comparisons. And you'll notice here that when we looked at the greatest barriers for leaders' ability to support what the organization needed to be done, you will notice the Middle East seemed to feel like they were much more ready in having the capabilities that they needed. And about a month ago, I did a Future of Work immersion day for the petroleum industry in Japan. People came from all over. There was a lot of people from the Middle East. And they were explaining to me about the 2030 vision and a way that a lot of the certification programs and competencies work here. And so I wonder if maybe that's contributed. But the lagging was the culture. You'll notice that in the Middle East, the respondents felt that culture was a much greater barrier than the global average. The other thing that's interesting, though, is when we said, where are your leaders focusing today, and where do you think they need to be focusing in 2 to 4 years' time? Globally, we got the same answer for today and 2 to 4 years' time. Focus on accessing, engaging, and developing the talent that you need. Here in the Middle East, they said the same for now, but for 2 to 4 years' time, it was an equal split across the 4 categories of focusing on new ways of working that challenge legacy orthodoxies. So that may also connect to culture, maybe. Creating resilient workforces, connecting teams, departments, geographies, and harnessing disruption as a catalyst. So I know that I've, given you a lot. I don't know how we're going for time, whether we're going to have... Okay, so we've got a few minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask all of you to reflect on this one, but I do want to make sure, and I'm sorry because as always I get too excited in being able to share all this with you. I do want to make sure that you feel like we get to take your personal commitment home. So the stop, start, continue, I'm going to give that to you for homework, okay? I want you to go away and I want you to think about stop, start, continue. And if you want to go even further, I do a lot of workshops where we do the next 5 days, the next 5 weeks, and the next 5 months. So think about stop, start, continue. But what I do want to make sure that we all get the chance to do, because I'm results oriented, I'm sorry, I can't help this, and I feel like I've talked. I want everyone to get their sticky note and think about what's your personal commitment that you're going to make to yourself and to all of us as a team together, that you're going to take away and focus on when you leave here today. And once you've got your sticky note, come and put it up over here on this. I guess we can try putting them up on this flip chart. You don't need to overthink it. You know, sometimes it could be something as simple as, I'm going to share this with my leader. Or sometimes it could be as simple as, I'm going to start trying to keep up with some of these trends. Or sometimes I get a lot, I'm going to reach out to Nick for more on something. And that's great. I love hearing what you're doing. I love nothing more than hearing the things you're doing, what you're working. It inspires me. So it doesn't need to be anything complicated. I did this with a law firm once, and two of them said, I'm going away to do a course in AI next week. I'm like, wow, that's pretty exciting. So yeah, just your personal commitment, bring them up, stick them up here, and then we will take a team photo. I'm sorry that we haven't got to hear more of you, but I do hope that, you know, it's been helpful. I do encourage you to reach out because, as I say, I'd love to talk more with you all and learn more. Great, we've already got some commitments. Oh, I should do my commitment as well. I must lead by example. Does anyone have a sticky note I can pinch? Oh, great. Oh, thank you. Thank you. And we can all huddle around the board because we're all going to have a photo together. So let's have a look. This is where, and we will take a photo of this as well. And I'm just going to say this. I don't know if we can or not, but I'll make sure it happens. We'll make sure we take a photo of this and share it with you all, because I think that's important. Can we make sure that we make that happen? Wonderful. So let's look at some of this. Relax and take it easy. Oh, yes. Seeing everyone, encouraging innovation, understand more of our employees, reviewing current hybrid practices with employee inputs. Amazing. Focus on human aspects, yes, of any intervention. Oh, look, we even got pictures. Well, get over my fear of technology. Educate senior leaders. Continue development, understand business. Wow. Learn more in technology. Stop blaming others. Wow. Okay, who hasn't put their personal commitment up? I know we've got many more. Bring them up so as we can quickly get a team photo. If you've already brought them up, still come up. Let's get our team photo. You've worked hard. You need to be in the team. We need to be inclusive. Are you able to help us get, oh, we've got a photographer, I'm forgetting. Okay. Should we all huddle around our commitment board? Huddle in, everyone. Everyone's saying this woman is mad. I promise you my husband and my gorgeous 22-year-old son would agree with you. Huddle in, everyone. Oh gosh, I don't need to be at the front.
You have to.
Huddle in, everyone. We can't miss anyone. Okay, Mr. Cameraman, we're looking at you. In Japan, we say, ich, ni, san, cheese. Oh, and there's one down the back as well, by the look. Wonderful. Wonderful. Oh, do we need this one down the back? Hang on, one more, sorry, one more. Down the back. Mr. Video. Okay. Are we okay now? Are we okay now? Okay.
Done?
Thank you. Oh, good. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Very interesting.
Appreciate all of your inputs. I'm sorry that we didn't get to hear more of you, but I do hope that it's just helped you further deepen some of those things. You've now got the 10 trends rather than just the 3 fundamentals. And yes, please keep in touch. Keep driving forward. You know, it's exciting what's ahead.